I know I've gotten in trouble for talking about politics, but my car is noisy, so if you don't want to listen to politics, just don't listen. That's all it is. But anyway, I couldn't help myself from talking about what happened with the Dobbs decision. So, I really believe that this is much ado about nothing on both sides. There's nothing to be jubilant about on the pro-life side, and there's nothing to mourn about on the pro-abortion side. They call it pro-choice side. I call it pro-lynching in the womb side, because really, if you look at what's going on, so much of it is attached to eugenics. There's a disproportionate amount of people of color who have abortions. There are 19 million black babies have been lynched in the womb by the same party that started the KKK, and then they have the audacity, the chutzpah, to go after the party of Lincoln and to lie about President Trump, make him sound like some kind of racist, when he was the guy who opened up his, for years, he's been fighting against racism. He was the only one to open up the country clubs to blacks and to Jews. He was the only one, he made the opportunity zones and all these things, and yet they make him sound like some kind of racist. It's ridiculous. But anyway, and this guy Biden is a big racist. A lot of his African American staff members have quit because he uses the N-word regularly, and yet the media covers all this up. I'm not making anything up. I'm telling the truth here. This is all documented. It's all well known. Anyway, as far as Dobbs is concerned, the New York Times said less than 16% of the abortions that were legal before, when Roe versus Wade was in action those years, less than 16% would no longer be legal. So what are we talking about here? And that's what the New York Times is saying, which I'm sure is somewhat inflated. It's probably more like 5 to 10%, and not that it won't be legal. You have to go to another state, and they'll be somewhat, inconvenienced by this change that really doesn't change law. All it does is recognize the role of the courts, and that's what it really is. There's nothing to be jubilant about on the pro-life side. There's nothing to mourn on the pro-death side. All there is to celebrate and to be jubilant about is on the Federalist side, on the constitutional side, on the separation of powers side, recognizing that the judicial branch is not the legislative branch. For that we should rejoice. For that we should be happy, and that's really for the cause of democracy. The Democrats are always saying they're for democracy, and that somehow, by making sure that it's only one person, one vote, is undermining democracy, when what they did, and they've been doing for decades in the big cities, with all of the cheating with the voting. I remember when I was a kid, they were interviewing in New York City, asking people, was it difficult to vote? And they said, well, the first time they didn't give me a problem, the second time they didn't give me a problem, but the third time I tried to vote, the first 2 times I got away with it, but the first time was legal, second time was not, and that canceled out someone else's vote, right? And then the third time they tried to vote, then they stopped them. That's when they gave them a hard time, and this has been going on in the cities forever. It's well known that Nixon beat Kennedy, but that the mafia had some played games, just like what happened here with Biden. But since they had something on Nixon, he was the vice president, he didn't stand up to them. But these are old stories. But anyway, but this is a cause for democracy. This is that the people can vote, and if they want laws to be changed, they can vote for the people that will make the laws that they want. And in a democratic society, we just decide these things. If we wanted it to be a constitutional issue, there's a method of amending the Constitution. If you wanted to put in the Constitution a right to an abortion, you could put it in through the amendment process, not through judicial fiat, not through what Jefferson warned about, that there would be a tyrannical oligarchy of the judiciary. And so this is righting that horrible wrong that had not, and the issue wasn't even the issue of abortion, which is of course a horrible wrong if it's not for the sake of saving the mother's life, or some other medically necessary reason, or some other justifiable reason, but just on demand for no reason, without any limitations. They're always saying, the Second Amendment, they're asking for common sense gun laws. What about common sense abortion laws? Okay, you want to say, but the left doesn't want that. When they tried to put it through the Senate, they didn't say, we want every state to say that you have to at least allow abortion to save a mother's life, or some other medically necessary reason, or until first trimester, or whatever it is, which is what was in Roe. That's not what they tried to enact. If they would have done that, they would have had plenty of Republicans go along with them, and they would have been able to pass that very easily. Instead, they went to the most extreme. And so what do you expect? But that's neither here nor there. The true thing here is this victory of federalism. And then I've heard people say, well, this whole idea of states' rights, that was already decided with the Civil War. That's not so simple. Again, we had to have an amendment to the Constitution to change these particular issues. And really, the South wasn't fighting for states' rights. If you look at the Dred Scott decision, because the northern states wanted the right to not have slaves in them, that if someone came into the North, they were a slave, and the North wanted to make that they could say if a slave came into a non-slave state, he wouldn't be a slave anymore. He'd go free just by virtue of the fact of being in a free state. And the southern states said no. The Democrats really, and that's what happened. It was the Republicans who freed the slaves. But the only way that it was able to be nationwide in the Constitution is through an amendment. That's how we changed the Constitution. This idea that the Constitution is a living and breathing document is nonsense unless you're talking about the amendment process, and it's a very difficult process for a reason, because it has to be something that has this type of an acceptance throughout the country in order to amend the Constitution. And so therefore, it's nothing is really going to change, because the truth is most of these states that are going to ban abortion, it's very rare anyway in those states, and 90% of abortions in America are done before 15 weeks anyway. So we're really talking about very, very little that'll be affected, and yet people are acting, the people on the left are acting like the world has come to an end, and the people on the right are acting like they're saving all these millions of lives, and really practically nothing has changed. But as far as the particular issue, but in the broader scope of things, for the cause of federalism, the cause of democracy, the cause of constitutionalism, a great victory has been wrought, and I think that's really what the Democrats really are against. It's not about, even though Democrats have a long history of racism and eugenics, and of course that's really what this is really about. It's not about a woman's right to choose. It's about the ability, since we Republicans put a stop to Democrats lynching adults, they want to be able to lynch, they moved the lynching to the babies, and they want to lynch black babies and Hispanic babies, and babies with Down syndrome, and all these different things that the Democrats really want to destroy, because they think they're going to make some super race by eliminating the things that the Democrats think are undesirable. This is not a conspiracy theory. When you listen to Al Gore, he talks like this. Al Gore talks about really the eugenics ideology, and it's really the Nazis learned their ideology from the Democrats, and the parties did not flip. They only changed their tone, but they didn't change their root ideology. So This is essentially what we have to look at and be understanding of, and that this is really their great loss, is that we took away a little bit of their power of judicial fiat to do things just through the judicial branch instead of through the proper method of the legislature. And because, again, this in no way banned abortion. All 50 states could decide on their own to do what Alaska does, to have abortion right until the last minute. Or what New York or California. I think Alaska is actually the most, surprisingly, the most liberal state when it comes to these things. And it's funny, my wife said, well, Alaska, there are no women in Alaska, so of course they're going to be very liberal about abortion. And it's like, I thought this is a women's rights issue. This is not, so because I think that there's a much higher percentage of men to women in Alaska, and Alaska has the absolutely most liberal abortion laws in the country, or one of the most. And even though it's a pretty red state, not all these things are so simple. But the biggest thing to discuss is, like we said, this idea of federalism, the idea of not states' rights to do anything unconstitutional, but states' rights within the realm of the Constitution. And again, if there was an overwhelming majority of Americans really wanted to have the laws like they have in Alaska or in California or New York, we'd be able to pass very easily to pass a constitutional amendment. The same thing with a lot of these other cases that have been passed through judicial fiat. They're worried about some of them, and two of them I don't think nobody is going to change, because none of the states want to change two of those cases. But they shouldn't be based on this case law of this idea of judicial review that has been out of hand. There is a proper idea of judicial review, but there's also an extreme form of which comes to activism and legislating from the bench. And all this does is right that wrong. It doesn't change any law. It's the opposite of that. It's giving the rights back to the legislatures. It could 100% be in the hands of the state of the federal legislature as well, and it's not for a reason, because of democracy. And so too, here with this, with this case, having it with the states, it's through a democratic process, and so if you really care about democracy, you really treasure democracy, you should be happy with this outcome, no matter what side you are on the debate about your own personal views about this issue. To give it back to the legislature. It's not only the state legislature, but also the federal legislature have the authority to do these things, and that's a really wonderful thing. And so we should really find a nuanced view about these things, because again, I'm not extreme on one side or the other of this particular issue of abortion, because I do believe that when it's medically necessary, there should be access to this when it is a healthcare issue, but I do not think it should be a tool of institutional racism. And I do believe there is such a thing as institutionalized racism. And I do believe that President Trump was fighting institutionalized racism, giving a leg up with opportunity zones and helping the historically black colleges and universities and so forth, fighting the institutionalized racism of the Democrats. And of course, I don't believe that most people who vote Democrat are racist. I think that they're just fooled by the rhetoric and the lies of the media and so forth, who I believe those who are in charge really are. I do believe 100% that Joe Biden is the most racist politician since George Wallace or Bull Connor, that he has the audacity of accusing the Republicans of being like them when he is like them. It takes one to know one, Joe. That's what it really comes down to, and it's been well documented. He has a long history of saying very insensitive racial things publicly, and the things that he said privately are much worse. Just like LBJ, who they all say, "Oh, look, he did all this for for civil rights when he did nothing. He just signed a law to make it look like he did something that was passed all by Republicans, who passed the civil rights legislation and was opposed by most of the Democrats. And LBJ said, he used the N-word and said the N-words will vote Democrat for the next 100 years because of his signing the law that the Republicans passed. And he still was an unrepentant racist for the rest of his life, and just was looking at it in a politically expedient way, and not in an actual way of real social justice. And so too, this Biden, he's a dirty politician and a racist, just like LBJ, and a disgusting person. And President Trump was not a politician; he was a businessman who understood how to run things, and he's been a man whose whole life was dedicated fighting against racism and anti-Semitism and all kinds of evils in the world. And he did more to help people of color than any president since Lincoln, to be honest. And he did tremendous, incredible things. We had the lowest black unemployment in history under President Trump, and yet the left and the media are trying to say that he's some kind of racist. What nonsense! So again, I apologize for making a political video, but I couldn't keep quiet. But the thing is, this Dobbs decision is very little change as far as the abortion debate, which I appreciate. I think that's the way it should be. I don't think there should be a national ban on abortion. I don't think there should be a national force on abortion. But if it was done legislatively, that would be okay. Judicially, that's not the job of the judicial branch to be doing these things. To try to eke out some argument that's very far-fetched when their job is only things that are very clearly in the Constitution. That's their job to do, and not to try to make some straw man argument to claim that something is within the realm of the Constitution when it's not. And the overreach of judicial review is ridiculous. It's what Jefferson warned us about. And we're thankful that, at least in a small part, it doesn't overturn all things that were done by judicial review that were overreaching. But at least this one, which is a big one, has been overturned in a sensible, middle-of-the-road manner, not banning anything, not forcing anything, just leaving it up to the branch of government that it belongs in. And this is a wonderful thing, and we thank. And the individual states can also amend their constitutions, as some have, and again, that's what federalism is about. That's the way that our system works, and that's how it's supposed to work. That's how it was designed. That California is not supposed to be Mississippi, and Arizona is not supposed to be Alaska, and Vermont is not supposed to be Minnesota. They're all different, and they have their own cultures and their own values that don't always fit into a straight right or left paradigm. And that's how it's supposed to be. We're supposed to celebrate that diversity, and this is an opportunity to go back to that diversity. That's the way it's supposed to be. That's the way it should be. And there's, again, nothing to be jubilant or to mourn about other than the cause of federalism and democracy. And even though this country is not a democracy, other than it's supposed to be the state, the House of Representatives is supposed to be the only real part that's more or less the closest thing to direct democracy. Everything else, I would really like to see a repeal of the 17th Amendment, or at least a modification to give some power back to the state legislatures, at least to choose the candidates, or something along those lines. But in any event, we're thankful for where we're standing, and we're thankful that that there was a return to some middle of the road and not extremism, and to allow the states can be extreme on one end or the other, and that's why we have 50 nifty United States. Thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, subscribe, comment, and we'll see you later.